All right. We are live and recording with Mr. Heston Beacco on the Apartment Guys podcast today. Heston, it's awesome to have you. My puppy dog Joey is saying hi as well in the background. I don't know if you could hear him or not, but
Yeah, I heard him. Yeah, thanks for having me on, Tate. Appreciate you
yeah,
reaching out.
yeah. No, it's great to have you. Heston, you're 26. I'll just tell a little bit about you to the listeners here. 26, born and raised here in Salt Lake City, where we're recording from. Like you, or like me rather, you have a 9-year-old dog. My dog's exactly 9 years old as well, and he's my family. And I know that your German short-haired pointer is your family. You're a snowboarder, you're a golfer, mountain biker, spend a lot of time with friends and family doing that sort of thing. We have a lot in common, man. We haven't mountain biked together yet, but we need to make that happen soon.
Yeah, we'll have to get out. I've been rehabbing a torn ACL that I had surgery on in February, so I haven't gotten out much.
Yeah, should make that happen for sure.
Yeah, we should.
Yeah. So as far as real estate, Heston, you spent a few years doing different trades and eventually started your own landscaping business in Park City. Did that for 4 years. And while you didn't know anyone in real estate, it always interested you, and you decided to get your license in 2017. Went full time in December of 2017, and in 2018 you were on the top producing real estate team at Keller Williams, and you were the principal on 24 transactions in your first year, totaling $9.6 million. That's a pretty good year, first year in retail transactions, huh?
Yeah, not too bad. I mean, when you break down the hours put in versus the net profit, so to speak, it's not like you had to put in 80-hour weeks to get there, for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's kind of how I not even was able to get ahead, but just kind of further myself past the average agent in a shorter amount of time, is because I just jumped in feet first, head first, however you want to say it.
Yeah, and you hustled. So yeah, and then at the beginning of last year, 2019, about a year and a half ago, you broke off, went solo, and you're just basically focused on investment properties and specifically multifamily apartment buildings, which is why we have you on the Apartment Guys. And you did a little bit in 2019, you did some solo investing as well. So we'll talk a little bit about your specific projects here in a bit. And most of all, you just have a true passion, a love for what you're doing here and what this industry is all about. And you love all aspects of it, right? The financial stability and the opportunity that provides to help other people, to network, to grow yourself, to develop yourself personally and professionally. It's just such an awesome industry to be in. I love it. So Heston, welcome, man. Thanks for being here. I'm stoked.
Yeah, me too, man. Thanks again for having me on. I appreciate it. Stoked to chat with you a little.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, it sounds like, kind of at your roots, you're an entrepreneur at heart. At a young age, you were doing different trades in the real estate world and doing, working as a landscaper. Did you own your own landscaping company, or?
So I worked for a buddy of mine up in Park City for 4 or 5 years, and I mean, when you say I ran everything essentially, and then I had some other stuff in Salt Lake, and that was kind of my own side hustle, right? So I had the W-2 income up in Park City, doing all that, and then I also had my own little shop kind of going in Salt Lake, just side work on the weekends when I wasn't in Park City, just grinding here. So
yeah. So you've had that drive. Do you feel like you've had that entrepreneurial drive since? I mean, was that born into you, or did you learn it?
I think so. Yeah, I don't think it was learned. I think the biggest thing was just kind of figuring out what I didn't want to be, and then finding something that I might want to be, and then kind of trying to hone in on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I've worked full time since I was 15 years old, even through high school and all that stuff. I mean, 30 hours a week in high school, I consider that full time, right?
Totally.
But yeah, so I don't know. It was kind of figuring out all those different things, and I like doing stuff with my hands, and it's not that I don't like the labor aspect of things. I just didn't see myself fitting into that mold long term and being able to kind of grow the way I wanted to, and also live the lifestyle I want. Like that's a big reason why I'm in real estate, right? Is like the lifestyle and the resources and the financial stability that it can provide. Like it makes sense, right? And there's not a lot of industries out there that you can do that and have the freedom that some of us have. But yeah, I mean, you get what you put in, right? Like, so I think from the beginning, I've always kind of had that entrepreneurial drive. And then once I figured out, man, I don't want to work for someone. Like, that's kind of where it sort of took off to the point where I'm like, I don't have to feel stressed. Like someone's always looking over your shoulder and stuff. Like, I hate that feeling, and I don't need that necessarily. Cause I'm a go-getter in the self-going factor of like actually moving the needle and taking action. I take a lot of action. I'm more of my business partner and me will joke. I'm more of like the ready, fire, aim, as opposed to the ready, aim, fire.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, well, and you had a really good taste for working as a retail agent, as in the residential world, doing transactions. And what I found, I still have my license. Do you still have your license? Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I still do a pretty good amount of retail work.
Okay.
Just on the residential side, just because, I mean, it'd be dumb not to. It'd kind of be my business is kind of churning really well right now. So it would be a miscalculation, I think, to just step away from that and go all in on something else.
Yeah,
it's kind of one of those ebbs and flows. You got to take it as it comes. Cause we all know it goes like that. So, when the getting's good, so to speak, you gotta be going. So, it's kind of like right now I sort of have a few different irons in the fire, if you will, but, the long-term goal is to not really be, a realtor, like full time. I mean, don't get me wrong. I like it a lot. It's a little too emotional for me. I'm more of a numbers driven guy. Like I used to always say, not good at math. Math was my worst subject in school, but I'm good with numbers. And there is a very big difference in between the two. I know how to read numbers on an average level, which I feel like puts me above most people in that regard, but I'm way below average in math, like not good at math, but simple mathematics, like what we need to know in order to underwrite deals and stuff like that. Like that's what I like. So
that's where you thrive, huh?
I don't know about thrive, but I like it.
Yeah. Well, what I was going to say, or the point I was going to make when it comes to, a lot of people think that you need to break into real estate and to break into specifically apartments, that you need to start small. Maybe you need to get your license, or maybe you need to flip a house or two or three, or maybe a duplex, and kind of work your way in. And the one point I would make is, you and I are both agents, and I would say that anybody that's interested in breaking into the multifamily space, because that's what this podcast is about, I would say, like, have a real serious conversation with people that are doing really well in the multifamily space, because what you'll find, I think, is that while there are similar skill sets in each avenue, the traditional retail agent model has very little to do with an investor model, especially when you're talking about commercial multifamily. When you get your real estate license, you're basically going through a class. They teach you the law, they teach you contracts, they teach you how to stay out of trouble, but they don't teach you how to run a business. And they certainly don't teach you anything about being an entrepreneurial investor as part of your gig. Right. So I just kind of like to demystify that myth that you need to break in at that particular level. We obviously both did it. So there's advantages to having your license and being immersed in the market where you're working, I think, is one of them. But I guess if somebody were asking me personally, like, what would you do to bust in? I want to get into small apartments. What would you do to bust in? I don't think my first step would be go get your license, right?
No, I would actually I would recommend against that.
Yeah.
If it were me. I mean, not like, okay, if I could do it all over again, you know, I wouldn't have gotten licensed. That's not necessarily the case for me personally, but for most people, I think it becomes a larger distraction, and it takes, it's really hard when you're, especially when you're learning something and getting into a new industry, it's really hard to like be able to fully commit yourself to something if you're like off doing other little things. Right. And so I just see that more as a distraction and a setback as far as time. Like, let's say today you had somebody, no experience, no anything, and they're like, I want to buy my first small apartment building in the next year. Okay, great. How are you going to achieve that? Well, I'm going to go get my license. It's like, you're going to go waste 4 or 5 months getting your license. Like, now you only have 6 or 7 months to go find that. Like, and you have all this other, like, you feel like you have to go do something and use the license. Otherwise it's going to be a waste. And I don't think it's necessary. And I don't think the other thing that you said was like, you know, flipping a single family house first or a duplex and then kind of moving into it. I don't necessarily think that's, you know, crucial. I think it's a good idea, especially if you're really, really new, to maybe do like a bread and butter flip just to kind of get an idea of how things go. Is it required? No. I mean, the amount of time, that was the big switch that I had, right? Like, don't get me wrong, we'll still buy a single family house if it's a good deal, just because, again, I'm a numbers guy. But like, that is not my, I don't want to buy like more than one house a year or two, you know, like maximum. Whereas I want to buy, you know, 20, 30, 40 apartments a year in the next 3-4 years. Like, I kind of want to scale to that point, right? But if I'm over here doing single family house stuff, gives me less time to focus on this, which is the end goal, right? Like, it's all about, and it's not the same for everyone. Like, some people, they like flipping houses. I personally don't. I think it's more work unless you have a good crew. I'll asterisk that. If you have a solid crew that you don't have to babysit, okay, I'll give it to you. But the economies of scale in order to, you know, successfully do a project versus single family versus like a multifamily, I mean, it's the same amount of work from our perspective. It might be more labor, it might be more cost, but from a managerial standpoint, I think it's less work. In my experience, which is, you know, not a ton, but I do have some. So
yeah. Well, and as an operator, you're underwriting the deal, you're raising the capital for the deal, you're negotiating, you're writing the contracts, et cetera, but you're not swinging the hammer. You're not, you know, you're not taking on the scale of the labor per se. You are the manager, you're the operator, and you're pulling the strings and calling the shots. So you shouldn't get too far into the weeds, and especially in the labor part of it. And that's what gives you the ability to scale and to do, you know, where 80 units all of a sudden is as easy to pull off as 20 units, like, because it's the same thing. You're just, you're getting a loan, you're raising money,
repeat.
Yeah. You're finding partners if you need to. You know, this is a team sport, so you're going out and finding the resources that you need to make it happen, and you know, and then you can do it, like you said, rinse and repeat, do it over and over again.
Yeah, and it's like that's the other thing I also noticed. Like, this 8 unit that we're doing right now, it's like they're all the same floor plan. They're all homogenized units. I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, I literally have to manage my guys on like 2 units, we'll say, and then they know exactly what to do, excuse me, on everything else, right? Like, it's not like people try and overcomplicate things, I think, 100%. Like, I dumb things down. Not even dumb down, but it's like, why overcomplicate something that is really simple? It's not hard. I promise you. Like, I am no further ahead or smarter than anyone else that's listening to this. I guarantee you most of them are smarter than me. I just have taken, you know, I was naive to the point where it's like, oh, I don't know any better. Like, that's probably why I got my real estate license, because it's like the end goal from the beginning for me was always investing, right? And I knew that the real estate license would benefit me not only in knowing the market, like you kind of said earlier, but also having capital to go do what I want to do. Which, you know, you don't need a ton if you do things correctly and you know how to raise funds. But, you know, it's nice to have some cash there. Like, but again, it goes back to that, like, I was naive, man. I don't know any better. And I still try and keep that mindset on certain things, right? Like, I like to call it like, okay, let's say I find a deal and I think it's a good deal. I'm a little more aggressive with my risk profile. My partner, Greg, is, he's more conservative for sure. And he's very analytical. So he'll look through 2-3 times and like pull different things out and be like, well, what about this? What about that? I know if I take him a deal and he's like, and I'm like, hey, what did you think of that? Did you have a chance to look at it? He's like, yeah, you know, it looks okay. I'm like, oh man, we got to go get this thing under contract. Like, if he thinks it's okay, I'm going to be foaming from the mouth here in a sec. So, and like you said, it's a team sport, right? Like you got to have that yin and yang, I think, to an extent. And that's where the book Rocket Fuel has been huge for me. Shout out to Pace Morby for linking me up with that one. And yeah, it just kind of goes over like the partnership aspects, right? Like I've been in this business for, 3 years. We'll call it 3 years. And I've had several awesome partners. I've had a couple terrible ones. And I've had a couple in between that, I felt like I didn't do them necessarily the full service of me trying to provide value, as you could call it the mentee, right? Like you have to be able to provide value to those people that are where you want to be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like everyone likes getting into it. Everyone likes talking about themselves and what they do, right? Like you don't realize when you get in, you're like, oh man, like nobody's going to help me. Nobody's going to want it. Yeah, he has all these apartments, but why the hell would he help me? Like it's because people in this industry are a lot more willing to, one, teach the information because you have a 90% higher chance of actually retaining it.
Yep.
But two, also just they were there at one point too, right? Like, and it's not like that in other industries, at least in my experience. Like the old boy who's had the job for 7-8 years, he's not going to train you to everything he knows, because then you're going to replace him. Like,
right.
They don't, in real estate, there's enough food in the sea, right? Like everyone can get their nut, so to speak. Like it's not that hard to kind of diversify when you look at things like that. But at the same time, I think also like having those mentors, like there's no way I would have done a tenth of what I've done. Like,
right.
It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, power of mentorship, and and to back up to the question of breaking in, if you're looking at like, hey, this apartment thing sounds amazing, I'd love to explore, I'd love to talk to more, I'd love to be in the conversation about getting in or jumping in, and how do I go about that? Well, we just kind of demystified that you should go get your license or even flip a house, right? So what is a good way to get in and a good path? Well, what you, Heston, and I've both found out is mentorship. And that can
100%.
that can be really powerful. Right down as far as to getting deals done and getting paid, like
everything. It's the number one thing. If I could give anyone advice right now, get a mentor. Find the smartest guy in the room, grab his pocket, and don't leave him alone until he tells you to get the hell out of his office. I did that when I became an agent. I did that when I became an investor. And or when I made that transition, and it's like, you've got to put yourself, like, if you're really committed to it, commit to it. Right.
Right.
Because it's not fair to his time or whoever your mentor is. It's not fair to them if you're not going to fully commit. If you're not going to fully commit, then like, why even do it? Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think in this conversation, by mentor, we're talking about somebody that you would actually work with and learn from at an experiential level, where you're digging in. Like one of our colleagues that I was in a mastermind with yesterday has had 2 apprentices now, and they work for him 100% for free, but he gives them everything. All the knowledge that he has, all the training he has, the spreadsheets, the resources, the scripts, the marketing, the leads. He opens his book on his entire business to somebody that's willing to come on board with him for maybe a year and work for free. And if they go find their own deal and bring it to him, of course they're going to get paid. So he's shifted his mindset from I'm training my competition to I'm going to invest in this person and make them uber successful, and therefore bring you know, one of the side products of that is that you bring yourself along, you bring your own career along, and your own progress along when you make other people better. And that'd be the other thing that I would add to what you were just saying, Heston, is when you do find that mentor, the smartest person in the room, and you latch onto them, make sure that you're bringing whatever you can in terms of your highest and best value to them. Like I'm a I'm a photographer by trade. I have that in my background. I have some graphic design in my background. I'm pretty good at sales. I'm pretty good at marketing. Those are the skills and the resources that I would go offer to somebody. If I were just getting started, I'd go to them and say, you know, I want to learn as much as I can. I can design your website, or I can work with your prospects, or I can cold call for you, or I can run to the dry cleaner for you. Whatever it is that you can provide value, like that is just so key in this world. The last thing a high achiever wants is somebody to come along and say, hey, can I pick your brain? Can we go to lunch and pick your brain? Like, you know, they don't necessarily, I mean, some of them will be real generous and cool with that, but for the most part, they're go-getters, they're on the run, and they want to know how you can help them as much as anything else. And if you can provide that, then, you know, that's a golden key to busting into this thing.
Well, and that's kind of like, it's kind of crazy now over the last few months, it's kind of switched to where like I've had people approach me and just like, hey man, can I take you to lunch? Can I pick your brain? Da da da. And I'm like,
yeah,
I'm always reluctant at first, just because lunches in this whole industry, I think, are like super unproductive on a massive scale. I think there's a way, I think you could get more done on a conference call than going to lunch, but at the same time, it's a necessary evil. But I just don't really like going and sitting down with random people and talking about myself for 30 minutes. I would rather be like, hey, you know what? And it's not like, I'm happy to provide a service or bring as much value as I can, but I'm not going to do that unless you, like you said, you know, somebody helps me out. Like I had these two guys approach me. They go to the U and they're like, want to get into real estate, done like a deal ish, and like are trying to just kind of bust into the market. Right. But they don't really have any guidance, but they're very analytical people. I'm not analytical. Right. So those types of people, I mean, I'm analytical to a degree, but not like, I'm not a systems and processes kind of guy, right? Like I can follow a system or a process, but I'm not going to implement and set, like, that's not the best use of my time. And so when these guys approach me and say, hey, can we cold call for you? Can you like, and I'm like, absolutely, dude. Like, yeah, I'll buy you guys a list if you want of, you know, some properties that I'm looking at or whatever the case is. And, you know, people like that, yeah, I'm going to go get lunch with you because I see that relationship. If I don't see the relationship moving past like what you said, oh, what can he bring me? Like, it's got to be a two-way street, right? And if I think I can provide you value and get like help you in some way and you can provide me value, then dude, I'll do that all day, right? But it's got to go both ways, and it can't just be me providing value to somebody or somebody providing value to me, because that's not fair to anyone, right? Like it's got to go both ways. And I also think you kind of know, I'm an instincts guy. I go with my gut a lot of times. And I think, you know, after you meet somebody once, whether there's somebody you want to do business with or not. I mean, there's a lot of people that I like, lots of people I like, would never do business with. Yeah. There's some people I don't like that I would do business with. Does that make sense? Like
totally makes sense.
That's just the number, like that's kind of how it goes. But I don't know. People get too wrapped up, I think, in obviously the analysis paralysis syndrome, which we've all been there, right? But at the end of the day, dude, what's the worst that's going to happen if you just take action? I promise it's not going to be bad. Like, you're going to recover from it, you know, but it's always in the back of your head. People keep going back to that. And that's where mentors have been huge to me. They'll be like, oh, dude, just do it. Like my first mentor, when I was getting my real estate license, you know him, Mike Brenny. Yeah. Awesome guy. Yep. He was flipping a big property up in Park City. It was like a 14-acre property. I worked up there every day for him for like months. And he's like standing next to me digging trenches. Wow. And I'm like, and I'm just picking his brain. I'm just like, so how did you get into real estate? How'd you do this? How'd you do that? And next thing I know, it's like, I've I mean, he gave me so much knowledge, and it also opened my eyes to like, that's where I want to be. You know what I mean? Like, what can I do to help him? How can I provide more value to him? And like 3 years later, I mean, that guy is, I'll go on record on anything saying this. I mean, that guy changed my life. Like, I couldn't be more thankful for what he did for me. And I mean, I don't know if it was just out of the kindness of his heart or how it all worked out, but the amount of knowledge that he gave, that's when he's like my first mentor, right? And still to this day, probably the best one I've ever had. I know I can call him, dude, what do I do here? Like, oh man, here's what I would do. Like, he's just a very smart individual. And you surround yourself with those types of people. And there's so many in Salt Lake, like all the heavy hit, like all those guys you were on the mastermind with yesterday. I'm like, man, how do I get in there? How do I get on that boat? You know what I mean? So it's like, finding value from everybody, I think, whether they're a mentor or an acquaintance or whatever. I mean, you've got to ask questions. Don't like, people feel like, oh, that's a stupid question. No, dude, there's really not like such thing as a stupid question. Should you take a bite out of a glass bottle? No. Yes, that's a dumb question. But like at the end of the day, you've got to ask to move forward, right?
Right. Yeah. And the one other thing I'd like to just kind of emphasize and hammer home is when you bring something of value, like, I mean, somebody coming to you or somebody coming to my company and saying, can I cold call for you? Are you kidding me? That's like, that shows a level of commitment and dedication. And like, I want to learn this to the point that I'm willing to do this level of, I mean, a lot of people love cold calling. A lot of people are really good at it. And a lot of people for a lot of people, it's grunt work, you know? And so like, but if somebody's willing to come and do that level of work and jump in with, you know, head first into that shows a level of seriousness and a level of like, here's what I'm willing to bring to you, as opposed to somebody that just wants to go to lunch and talk a little bit of strategy and networking and that sort of thing. Yeah,
exactly. Which I'm always up for that. Don't get me wrong, but like, there's a difference between a productive lunch meeting and actually sitting down and discussing business with somebody on a personal. Are we going to do business together? Are you going to come into my company? As opposed to like, oh, we're just shooting it, you know, sitting here talking about our business. Like, I don't. What value do you pull out of that, right? Like, oh, maybe you got a little gold nugget that you didn't know about before, but like at the end of the day, that synergy and those partnerships, like you said, it's a team sport. Whether somebody's in the deal or not in the deal, there's still people I consider on my team because they've given me advice. They've given me whatever the case is, right? Like those are still on my team. They might not even know about a deal. And I still consider those people like my team because I know I can go to them with anything. And I hope they know they can come to me for anything too. Like, and it's not just business stuff too. Like the amount of people that call me, hey man, can you come to help me tear out some drywall? And I'm like, sure, man, I guess. Like,
oh boy.
But it's like, and then I don't do it on my own projects, right?
Right.
So it's like, it's that whole trade-off. But then that's still, that always comes full circle for me too. Like, let's say I go help someone tear out some drywall or something. Like, then I tear my ACL and I need to cut down a big tree in my yard. Cool. Like my buddy shows up and does it. You know what I mean? Like it always comes full circle, but it'll come full circle if you screw someone over or kind of don't have like-minded goals. I think that's the biggest thing off the bat with partners. Like if you're not on the same page, I mean, you're going to have disagreements and stuff, but if you guys don't have the same clear road, somewhat of a road path, it's gonna implode, I think.
Yeah, it makes it tough. I have a partner and we've been partners for 10 years. I've worked with him for 20 years and we work beautifully together, but there's been times, I mean, you know, you work for somebody that long and there's times when you go, well, I don't know if this is headed the right way, or I don't know if we're headed in the same direction. And you got to kind of keep evolving and growing together and communicating as much as you can. We could do a whole show on partnerships, I think.
Yeah, I could write a book on partnerships.
For sure. And just about everybody I know in the industry has had partnerships gone bad. And usually those are partnerships on individual deals, not necessarily business partnerships, but those can go bad too, you know?
Well, you got to date your partner. That's the best way I put it. Do a deal first. Do a deal with them and see if you can, like, it's that whole thing, like, that people say you don't know somebody really until you live with them.
Yep.
Same thing. You got to do a deal start to finish with your partner before you decide, okay, we're going to take this to the next level. And it just worked out with my partner, Greg, and me, just because we just understand, we just clicked up, right? Like, we understand each other. We have the same vision. He's good at what I'm not good at. He's pretty good at most things though. So I don't want to say I'm better than him at one thing or another. I just take more action for sure. Like, cause he's the analytical guy. He's got to be my gut check. He's got to pull me back and say, hey, I know that shiny object over there looks nice, but look at this other not so shiny object that is going to be a much better investment long-term. Things like that. You know what I mean? And having that is like priceless in my opinion.
Yeah. Let's real quick, Heston, I'd like to just talk about one of your deals because I think it's a pretty cool entry, I guess the entry level commercial multifamily deal. It's an 8-unit that you're doing here in downtown Salt Lake City, right?
Yeah, it's just east of Trolley Square.
Yeah, yeah. So, and for the, you know, for people that aren't necessarily super familiar with the Salt Lake, Utah market, the downtown area of Salt Lake City is probably one of the hottest markets in the country right now. It's still holding very, very strong in this crisis, the COVID crisis. Sales are still through the roof. Buildings still through the roofs. You know, demand is much higher than supply, and so, so when you can pull down and make a deal work, you know, a multifamily deal inside of the general Salt Lake City area, it can be very, very exciting. You can be leasing, you can take rents from less than $1 a foot to $250 a foot if you're in the right part of downtown, and even higher than that. So talk a little bit about your 8-unit, how you found it, what your strategy was / is on it, and what your desired outcome is from that deal.
Yeah. So that deal came across that was actually a personal friend of mine's uncle that was part of a trust that owned it. So it was like a family trust that owned, I think there was 37 doors, 3 properties. So they were selling this portfolio, really good area. That's why I was so attracted to it. They'd owned the property for, I think, 12 years, hadn't done any work, old tenants that were, you know, under market. And they definitely needed a nice rehab. So I kind of backtrack. I kind of got the multifamily itch, or started kind of, I guess, researching and educating myself on multifamily about, it was like April or May of last year. Like a month later, I was hanging out with my buddy, and he's like, I got to run home. Like, I got to go meet an appraiser in the morning at like 6 a.m. I'm like, you live in an apartment, dude? Like, what? He's like, yeah, my uncle's selling it or something. I'm like, oh, your uncle owns that? I'm like, dude, you need to give me his number. Like, you need to let me call him. And after about a month of haggling him, he finally gave me his number. And I reached out to the gentleman who was, he's an attorney out of San Francisco. And we just started the conversation. This was a year ago. It would have been June of last year. It was the first time I talked to them. And we closed in March.
Wow.
So over lots of phone calls.
So let me just highlight what you did there. So you were already in the mindset of, I want to do commercial multifamily. So you had already made your decision. You'd already declared your intention, essentially. And an opportunity comes along, and because you were in the right mindset, you saw the opportunity and you went after it and you got it. It wasn't something that somebody came along and gave you or wholesaled to you. It was something that you went out and hustled and spent how many months negotiating with? Like crazy, 8 months?
We didn't even get it under contract for, it was like 6 months before I even got it under contract. I'm talking to them like every other day.
What was the holdup? Just terms?
5 family members in a trust. We should list it. No, we shouldn't. Here's the price. Oh, this guy came in higher than you, but he's asking for a fee. Like, I mean, I did everything I could to try and make it a win for them. And that's the other thing is like, there was no BS. Like people smell, like I smell that from a mile away. And I see it when somebody's like, you know, sitting there essentially like, oh yeah, I've got this huge track record. I've done all these deals, da, da, da. It's like people see right through that. And if they think you're going to lie about something stupid like that, it's like total an ego thing. What else are you going to lie about? Like through the deal, can you really call it like, and so that's how it really started. They're like, hey man, you know, I really like you. I like you a lot. We've had a lot of conversations, but like, do you have the ability to close on this? And I'm like, you know, full transparency. I don't have that type of net worth and liquidity. I know a lot of people that do though. And one in particular who will be partnering on it. Yeah, no, I can get the deal done. It's like, there's no fluff. I'm just as transparent as I can. Like, yeah, I think we're going to be able to get this done. I wouldn't be wasting your time or mine for that matter if I didn't know I couldn't close on it. And so just being transparent from the beginning, you know, they're finally like, all right, man, like, what do we have to lose? Like, he either closes it or he doesn't. And I'm like, here's $100,000 of non-refundable earnest money.
That speaks volumes.
And it's not and especially when it's not your money. It was my partner's money. So it's like, and this is before we had fully gone in together on it. And I'm like, well, you know what? Like, and that's where I say, like, you just got to take that action and try and get the upper hand on things. But like you said, like, it was being in that mindset. That would have been 2 months before, and he would have been like, oh, I got to go run. Like, I wouldn't have even thought about it, right? Like, you've always got to be, another mentor of mine, Mike Baird, has always be shopping. Never stop shopping. Like, and it's true. Like, you've got to have more tools in your tool belt in order to, because just because it won't work on a traditional model or something doesn't mean it won't work on a creative finance model or something. Like, you've got to have all those different tools in order to get your brain thinking like that. Like, where you run from talking to somebody in the grocery store, like, hey, how's your day going? To, oh, you own 12 rentals? Like, yeah, I'd love to take a look at them. That literally happened to me like a week ago.
Wow.
Random person, just start a conversation with them.
Yeah.
And it's like, you'd be surprised, you know? And so it's, I don't know. That's kind of how I see it, I guess.
And I think the other thing that shows is, like, once you break in, like, once you do get your first deal and get it going, that it really opens the floodgates to other conversations that you're going to have with people. Because all of a sudden, if you own apartments, even if it's 8 units or even, 5 units, 4 units and lower is considered residential. So we try to stay above that, because there's advantages to commercial financing that you don't get with residential, and other perks, tax advantages, that sort of thing. But so 8 units, and they needed to be fixed up. How far along are you in that process, and how much have you spent, and that sort of thing?
We're a little past halfway. 2 of the units are done. They just need some touch-ups. And then we're actually working on doing some exterior work on it right now before we start leasing it out. It just doesn't have a lot of curb appeal. So we want to make sure that, our quality of tenant likes the curb appeal of the property. So we're working on that now, and I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks we'll have those 2 listed. And in about 2.5 weeks, we'll have 2 more listed. My guys have been cruising over there. Like, we didn't even start with COVID. Yeah, to put it in perspective, we closed March 3rd. Wow. That would have been 2 weeks later.
Yeah, right. COVID. Yeah.
There's a multitude of things that could have happened. We definitely wouldn't have gotten the terms that we got on our financing. We got really attractive debt. We might not have even been able to close the deal for a number of different reasons. And then 3, it also almost, delayed our timeline even further because of other things. So it was good timing, if there is such a thing. And we kind of caught that win perfect. But again, we didn't really lift a hammer over there until like the middle of April. Yeah. And I mean, we're talking fully gutted. I mean, we put about, when we're all said and done, including some exterior, total will be in about $25K a unit. So I mean,
that's pretty hefty. That's a hefty.
It's a large. it's a large remodel. The units are
Yeah.
only 520 square feet.
Yeah, that's a lot. So
So
you did everything. You did floors, you did cabinets,
flooring,
probably.
cabinets, quartz countertops, all new appliances. We took out the furnace. The big value add component on that, they had the furnaces that were just shoved into a hallway closet, and then they just furred out two by off the wall, and then threw a piece of plywood over it for 9 years. Never changed a filter.
Oh,
So
geez.
we tore it. Yeah, it was bad. So we tore those out, and we actually put in these ducted mini split systems. They're
Yep.
really cool. It's like a normal mini split, but they're ducted, hanging from above, and then just furred out around that and everything, so we could add a washer dryer. So every unit will now have a washer dryer in the unit, which is a huge value add, especially for who our ideal tenant is most likely going to be probably like a single or young working professional couple that works downtown. A lot of people in that 9th and 9th area don't even have cars. They just ride bikes everywhere. I mean, where this property is located geographically is right between the University of Utah and downtown Salt Lake. So you're going to get maybe a couple students that have a little bit more, money, like a grad student or something like that, who could afford it, because they're not necessarily going to be cheap. We're not top market, but I mean, you throw $25,000 at a unit, you're going to raise the rent significantly. So, I mean, we were at $775 average rent before. I mean, we'll probably get $1150 on all the doors. I'd be surprised if we didn't get that.
Yeah,
Very surprised.
Yeah, knowing the market a little myself, I would say that's probably conservative even.
And I underwrote it at 1050, so it's like,
yeah, there you go.
We set ourselves up to pave it nicely. The other thing that I haven't been as worried about COVID on that deal. Like, a lot of people were like, hey, we're holding off, we're not doing any CapEx, we're just gonna see what happens, kind of thing. Whereas we just, like, I throttled up. I fully throttled up because we need to get it done. We have, like I said, we have our lender on it. Awesome. But we have a 6 to 12 month term on it with an option to extend for a half point for another 6 months. I think right at, like, when we hit the 6 month, like the first day, we'll be ready to refinance. We'll be out of there, which is an extremely quick turn. I've had some other colleagues come and look at it, and I'm like, yeah, like, just more or less to get a feeler on, like, how they think I'm moving, quickness on it. And, like, they're like, yeah, you're actually moving really good. I'm like, okay, that makes me feel a lot better, because I felt like I'm not going quick enough. But you can only go so fast, right? Like, you got to do it right. And there's obviously things I would do differently if we weren't holding it. This is a long-term hold for Greg and I, kind of starting off our balance sheet and building that. So we can go qualify for some higher and bigger loans. So if I was painting, or if I was flipping it, I would paint the brick, and I would do a couple other things that I think, an end investor would pay more money for. For us, we just want really nice property that, we're not over improving, but I mean, at the end of the day, we probably have slightly over improved. But if it's a building you're going to hold for 10 or 15 years, if you don't massively over improve it, it's probably a good thing. It's probably going to save you some money long term.
Yeah.
So we did all individual electric shutoffs on the back and stuff. I mean, we're doing it correctly, and it's been a really good experience. Like I was talking to you previously, like, when you talk about the commercial financing thing that you mentioned, like, that was the most eye-opening experience with this whole thing, is like how much easier it is to go get a loan for like $3 million as opposed to 300,000.
Yeah.
Those residential underwriters just throw you through the ringer, and it's not the same with commercial.
Right.
It's more, and that's why I'm more drawn to commercial, just because my personality type. Like I said, I'm not your emotional buyer. I'm more data driven. So it's like, well, that's how commercial is, right? And so it makes more sense. But at the end of the day, I'll probably always be in residential in some form or fashion.
Yeah, right. I look forward to not being in small residential anymore. I see us going into strictly commercial, but that's after trying almost everything and really seeing the light on apartment buildings.
Yeah, exactly. And my apartments are by far my favorite asset class. I just with kind of how the market has been moving the last couple months, I like existing multifamily.
Yeah.
And there
Oh
has
yeah.
not been anything, at least on a local level,
Right.
that's been a decent deal of existing multifamily over the last 2-3 months. And
Yep.
I can't get stagnant. Like,
Right.
I just bought a house in Taylorsville just to go flip because I'm like, we got to keep ball rolling. I think we can get in and
Yep.
out in 35 days, dude. Like, you know what
There
I
you
mean?
go.
Because you can't, if you sit around waiting for a deal to come to you right now, at least in the commercial side, I feel like you're going to be waiting a long time. I think there's going to be some tremendous opportunities over the next 6 to 9 months,
Yeah.
6
Me
to
too.
12 months, however you want to kind of quantify that, but they're not here yet. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I'll be ready when they are. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to be consensus with so many people nationally and locally is there's going to be really great buying opportunities here over the next, like you said, 6, 9, 12 months, even sooner as undercapitalized and undermanaged assets start to become available on the open market because
Right.
owners can't hold on to them. And then there'll be some positive situations too, where owners are either, just retiring or wanting to 1031 some assets or even seller finance and just be the bank. Right. And
I
that's,
think I think seller finance, there's going to be more of those opportunities than probably anything. But again,
mhm,
90% of people don't even ask the question,
right.
you know?
Yeah.
Like, again, it's getting in that mindset of having, okay, well, this tool in my bag doesn't work. What about this tool? That tool
Right.
doesn't, okay, what about this one? Like,
Right.
if you only
Right.
offer one option, then you're going to get one result,
Yeah.
whether it's a yes or a no, you know what I mean? As opposed to kind of broadening that. Because I like putting deals together. Like, that's my favorite. And now
Mhm,
I look at everything like it's a deal. I'm like,
mhm,
how can we make this? Like,
right.
I'm like looking at maybe buying a new truck, and I'm like, I wonder if I can just find somebody who will finance it for me. Like, I don't really need to. I could pay cash for it, but like, let's have some fun with it. You know, it's just funner that way, I think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's kind of where I'm trending towards as well, and just continuing to obviously educate myself. Especially multifamily, there's just a lot to know. I mean, I've definitely learned a lot in a year, but nowhere near where, you know, I would like to be, which is fine. I mean, Rome wasn't built overnight. These things take time, and
Right.
I think that's the thing that most people get caught up on, or they fail once and then they're like, oh well, I failed there. Like, dude, I failed so many. I've failed way more than I've succeeded in
Mhm,
anything. And if that's flipped, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not
mhm,
growing. Like, if you're not failing for that whole failing forward thing,
right.
it's so true. And I
Yeah.
mean, people say, well, that's not really me. And it's like, well, that's fine, but like, you're restricting yourself. You're putting yourself in a box. Like, if you can't actually, how do you know you can't do it? Because you failed once. That
Mhm,
doesn't say anything. It just says you're a quitter at the end of the
right.
day, in my opinion. Like, this stuff doesn't happen overnight, but once you see the long-term effects, like you said, and you see the benefit that can come from it, and the financial stability and the freedom, it's like, yeah, if it was easy and it could happen like that, everyone would be doing it.
Mhm, right.
It's not hard, and it's like being an entrepreneur is hard. Like,
Right.
there's days that are very difficult. You know what I mean? Like, you're pretty much by yourself most of the time, even with a partner. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So, just not like losing that confidence, I guess, and just like eyes on the prize. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the concept of it's simple, but it's not easy. Like this business is,
Exactly.
there really is, once you have a certain set of specialized knowledge and skill sets, um, there really is, kind of a simplicity to it. It's not a difficult game to really get your head around, if you immerse yourself in it.
Well, it's having
Um,
those people around you. You know,
right.
like
Right.
that's gonna put you ahead of everyone else tenfold. Like,
Yeah.
in my opinion, because they're gonna say, "Oh yeah, I made that mistake. Don't do
Yeah.
it for X, Y, and Z." And then when you
Yeah.
come across it 4 years later, you're like, "Oh yeah, what did he? Oh, I shouldn't do. Okay, we're
Right.
good." Like, and
Right.
you'd be surprised at some of the stuff that you remember like years down the road, right? Like, I'm sure you do when you're like listening to an audiobook or reading a book or a
Right.
podcast or something, and there's a little tidbit, and then like you find it later in life where you're actually applying it. Like, dude, that's gold to me. Like,
Yeah.
that's my absolute favorite. Like, being a sponge and just trying to absorb it all. Like, yeah, you're not going to remember it all,
Right.
but you know what? You're going to remember bits and pieces, and that's what really is going to carry you to the next level, I think.
Yeah. And there's such things as digital mentorship too, like YouTube videos and these podcasts. Like the more that you
Oh
expose
yeah.
yourself to people that are doing what you want to do and are here to help you and learn how to do it and do it.
I didn't pay for any coaching or mentorship until this year.
Interesting. Yeah.
And which I regret. I regret that too. I will throw that caveat in there. I mean, having a mentor and paying for a mentorship, they're not the same thing. It depends on who. It's very person by person, right? But I wish I would have taken the coaching aspect of things a little more seriously or early on, because I think that is crucial to getting to the next level and scaling, which is where everyone that gets in this industry wants to go. Like, you wouldn't get into apartments if you don't want to scale. That's what it's about. That's why it's a team sport, like you said. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I think just keeping that path of direction and surrounding yourself with those people, like you said, is just like monumental. And honestly, like, who wants to own a business who wants to do all this by themselves? What fun is that?
Right.
You can't go sip Mai Tais on the beach by yourself. Like, that's depressing, man.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that's part of the fun, I think, of this business, is working with really high level people that you're on the same page with and have tons of integrity and tons of drive and resourcefulness and creativity and know how to get things done and make things happen. So
100%.
Well, Heston, I feel like we could talk for a while about a number of these things. The seller finance conversation is really an interesting one that we can get into maybe on another episode. But
yeah, I'd love to.
I see you as a rock star in this space in the making. I think you've got an incredibly bright future ahead. I feel very fortunate to be a colleague of yours, and I look forward to contributing to your path as any way that I can, and hopefully that's in the way of doing deals and getting deals done together.
Absolutely, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks again for having me on. It's been a good talk. And like you said, we could probably sit here for like 10 or 12 hours and talk about a number of things.
Totally. So we'll do it in the future. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the end of this. I hope you found tons of value in it. And we will be back with another episode of the Apartment Guys, hopefully next week. I'm back from vacation now, so we're rocking and rolling. So you all have a good week, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Tate.
Thanks, Heston. This was awesome. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to The Apartment Guys with Tate Seamer. Tate and friends are grateful to have you as a loyal listener. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe, rate, review, and share with friends on your Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, or any other podcast platform. Also, check out Tate's YouTube channel for videos of many of these episodes and more. Until next time, take massive action steps and rock on.